On this week's episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, we are continuing on the same kick that we've been going on for the last few weeks. A couple of weeks ago, I uploaded an episode about how Italian citizenship by descent has changed my life personally. Then last week, I uploaded a video with an overview about how to get Italian citizenship by descent. And this week, actually, I'm going to be talking about some of the things to do after you get Italian citizenship. So actually from YouTube user @ClassicHow, Ciao Rafael, can you tell me where in your podcast you say something about what to do after being granted Italian citizenship? I was just recognized by the Ministry of Interior and I want to know all the steps to follow. I'm currently in the US and planning to leave for Europe in a couple of years. Thanks in advance. So, Classic Pal, thank you so much for leaving that comment. Of course, below that comment on last week's episode, I left a link to a playlist that I have with what was then 77 episodes, with this episode probably 78 episodes, about what to do once you're already an Italian citizen. But of course, I'm Rafael Di Furia. Again, this is another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and roll that intro. Also, by the way, for those of you who are returning viewers and are noticing things might look a little different, yes, things look different. Sometimes a revamp is necessary. Maybe not a full revamp, but you'll see. And before getting into what I would say would be the most important steps to take if you're planning to move to Italy as an Italian citizen, let's talk about some of the basic things. If you are, say, for example, living in the US, you've made your application for citizenship by descent, and you are now wondering, okay, what's next? What's to do? The first thing that you're going to want to think about will be registering with the AIRE. For some of you, this would be a roughly automatic step that maybe the consulate will help you with, that they'll say, hey, you need to do this, or that it will be part of the finalization. There are different ways that this could kind of get wrapped up into your process, but it's a very important step if you choose to remain in the US because, for example, even if you want to get a passport, you'll need to be registered. If you want to vote as an Italian from abroad, then you will definitely need to be registered with the AIRE. What is the AIRE? AIRE, the Registry of Italian Citizens living outside of Italy. These registries are partially held by the municipality of where you would have gotten your citizenship through, as well as the consulate itself. The base kind of files that will be held would be through that original municipality back in Italy. Like, for example, if you do need a copy of your birth certificate, you would have to order it from Italy, not from the consulate itself. At least that's how things are set up at this moment in time. And for this next step, I would say it's not necessarily that you're doing it in order or out of order, because you could theoretically do this at really any time, just as long as you give them a reason why you need it. But that is the Codice Fiscale, the Italian tax code, the fiscal number. This is going to be something that is super important because you will need it for almost everything. Not everything, but you'll need it for a lot. Like, for example, if you're wanting to sign a rental contract, a legal rental contract, you will need to have this Codice Fiscale to put onto the contract itself. Then it will be registered. But why is it important to have your rental agreement registered? Or if you're purchasing an apartment or purchasing a home, then you can use this instead. But it is important to have this all legally registered because then you will need after that to go and register your residence in Italy. Why do you need to register your residence in Italy? This will be so that if you want to vote, or for example, if you want to get an ID card, whatever it may be, you'll have these options, but we'll get into that in a second. But if you are going to be applying from the US, definitely get a copy of your passport because that will be your main form of identification as an Italian who's living outside of the European Union. You can use it to travel into Europe, but I wouldn't advise using it traveling out of the US. Technically, it's not even allowed to do that if you're an American citizen. So of course, if you are planning on going to Italy as an Italian dual citizen, don't think that only having an Italian passport is enough. You'll need passports from both the US and Italy. Just before we get into the next section, I do want to say a huge thank you to those of you who help to make these episodes possible on a monthly basis through rafaeldifuria.com/support, as well as patreon.com/rafaeldifuria, and the super thanks button down below here on YouTube. As well as a huge thank you to those of you who take part in the conversations, these open conversations, and leave your thoughts down in the comment section below here on YouTube, as well as to those of you who tap or click the like button, as well as share these episodes with your friends. All of these help in their own particular way. And with all of that said, let's continue into the rest of the episode. But if you are in fact thinking about moving to Italy, then the next step will be to potentially notify the consulate where you are currently residing that has this jurisdiction over where you're residing. Then in that case, that will actually, if you let them know where you are going to be moving to, that can help facilitate the process. Because now talking about if you are an Italian citizen recognized outside of Italy moving to Italy, then the next step will be to, again, get this ball rolling on your residence. And so, of course, you definitely want to have the Codice Fiscale before you arrive. Can you get it in Italy? Most definitely. And actually, you can get the code quite easily on a piece of paper. But the thing is, you will get this in other forms. For example, maybe on the health card or on your ID card, on the new electronic IDs. Things have changed a little bit since I actually received mine, because I received my ID just at like one of the last weeks or the last week before the municipality where I was applying had started actually making the electronic IDs available. So I still have to walk around with the paper booklet as my form of ID. I mean, it's not a real booklet, but it's a folded piece of paper, we could say. You will need your Codice Fiscale so that you can get your rental contract or even purchasing a property. Once you have that all registered, you can go ahead to the municipal offices, to the comune, and go ahead with making your presence known. This step actually consists of a couple of different parts. And so the first part will be going to actually submit your documents, submit the paperwork in person. There can be ways of doing this online, but you can do this in person and you might need an appointment. It depends on where you are. Each different comune will have their own way of going about things. Usually they'll be pretty similar, but there can be little individual details that will differ. You may want to go onto the website for this municipal office to see what their procedure is and if in fact you do need an appointment. And so then once you go through, you give them your rental contract and you register your residence in Italy, then from that point, you theoretically should actually be able to go and register for the Italian healthcare system, getting on both the local and national system. This is all done at one time, so you don't have to worry, like, where's the local office, where's the national office? You just want to go to what is called the Azienda Sanitaria Locale, the local healthcare company. It's not really a company, it's the authority. But at this point in time, you should actually be able to go to register with the local healthcare authority. From there, then this is actually an intermediary step, which is not required, but definitely recommended that you get into. But of course, like I said last week, I'm not an Italian lawyer. This is not legal advice. You do what you do, how you do. But the next step in this registration process for your residency will be playing the waiting game. Hurry up and wait. It's as simple as that. What will happen is that you will receive a visit from the police, the local police, or from somebody acting on behalf of the comune, as well as the police, someone maybe acting jointly between the two. I've had both situations happen. I think it's more normal, though, that a police officer would actually pay you a visit. During this visit, they may want to look at your contract to see that you are the person that it says on the contract, and they'll look at your IDs and double check that your information is correct as to what has been said within the registration. And then also they might want to look in some of the bedrooms to make sure there are sheets on the bed, clothes in the closet, to make sure that you're actually living there. One of the reasons why they do this is because in some regions of Italy, there are certain tax incentives for individuals to live there. So they want to make sure that people aren't like claiming a residence that's not actually where they're going to be living. But when I'm saying ID in this particular case, if you are that Italian citizen who has moved to Italy from abroad, and this is your first time living there, then you might not actually have the carta d'identità. You might only have your passport. Of course, your passport will be your form of ID while you're there. And it's definitely something that will be worthwhile keeping with you in all situations. And then once you've had this visit from the police, then you might want to wait a day or a few. And then from this point, if you don't already have your Italian ID, then you will be able to go back to the comune. Whether you have to make an appointment or not will depend on where you're going. And then at that point, you'll be able to make your application. If you're doing the electronic ID, the new version of the electronic ID, then you may actually have to wait a little bit of time before you receive that. If somehow you're still in a place where they're going to be able to give you a paper one still, then you'll be able to potentially get that on the spot. But as far as I'm aware, that is becoming much more uncommon these days, that comuni are still even able to issue these types of ID cards. And also I would say as time goes on, if you're looking at certain online services and so on, that having the new electronic ID could be a bit more convenient. And also just for carrying it around in your wallet, it's going to be the size of like a credit card. It's pretty much the exact same thing. Whereas the old-fashioned paper booklet that I was talking about can be very annoying to carry in your wallet, and they do deteriorate over time. This next step isn't necessarily in the order of how you should get things done, but it's another step that you definitely may want to consider taking. And if you are planning on living in Italy full-time, I would highly recommend to consider getting an Italian bank account. One of the reasons why I do recommend as an Italian citizen living in Italy to have a bank account is because there are certain functional things to make payments that will become a lot easier if you do have the bank account. For example, if you need to have your utilities signed up for automatic bill pay, then that will have to come from a checking account. There are different types of accounts in Italy. Like, for example, you can get what's pretty much the equivalent of a prepaid card with a bank number attached to it, and you can get paid to that card, but it's not a real bank account. It's something that I feel is pretty unique to Italy because, like I was saying, this card is almost like somewhere between a debit card, a reloadable gift card, and partially a bank account with all of the services that come attached to it. It's a particular thing. You can get this from most banks as well as even the post office, because in Italy, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, the post office is not just for mailing things. It is also a bank as well as a cellular service provider. If you want to see a video that I actually recorded about them a number of years ago, I'll try to make sure to put that up in the corner of this video. I think it's this corner. Could be this one. If you're watching on a TV, then I'll try to make sure that I have this in the comment section below, or I'll put it in the end card at the end of this episode if I remember. But one of the reasons why I believe that it is worthwhile to have a proper Italian bank account is because from a functional standpoint, to take care of bills, even if you're not doing auto pay, you can pay from your bank account, scan something depending on the bank's app and how that all works. Otherwise, you might have to go to a tabacchi or to the post office to pay things, and that can get annoying. And then, of course, there are extra service fees. Not only for some services will you get better pricing if you set them up on auto pay, but for certain things like some home internet, you may actually be required to have a proper bank account. But then, of course, there are things like if you want to get your utilities set up, or television, for example, don't expect to find channels with programming in English. And if you do, it will very likely be dubbed in Italian. Maybe there might be certain service providers where you can actually hit a button to change to the original language, but it might not always be the case that the original language would be an option. But of course, you have options like, say, Netflix and Disney Channel. Wow, that takes me back to the 90s. Disney Plus, rather. But then I think there are other services that are affiliated with HBO and Paramount and so on. And there are different online services if you are looking for some programming in English, but there might be limitations on what's available in English and what's not. Also, Amazon Prime is another thing that would be available in Italy as well. And also, if you are thinking about getting a cell phone in Italy, you don't necessarily have to have a local bank account for that. You could set that up with an international debit card. I know people, for example, who've had like a Wise card and set up with Iliad, for example. And with that, especially some of these no contract options that exist now, you'll be able to pay potentially on any type of card. With the services, though, that will require an Italian bank account, then in that case, you would have to have an Italian IBAN number. And that IBAN, this banking number that I was talking about before, to be able to make that payment would only be possible from a proper bank account, not this prepaid debit card that I was telling you about before that can also act kind of like a bank account. If you're living in certain metropolitan areas, then if you are registered there, then getting a local bus pass, potentially for even a discounted rate, could become an option for you. So if that's going to be necessary, then you can start looking into that. And then also having all of these things will set you up in the right direction for, like, actually, if I'm remembering correctly, according to what Mr. Marco Penmunian said from Italian Citizenship-Assistance.com, the lawyer that I do the Italian Citizenship podcast with, which is called the Italian Citizenship Podcast, for those of you who are looking for it. If I'm remembering correctly, he mentioned in previous episodes that if you are wanting to purchase a car in Italy, you actually have to be a resident of the country. So that's one of the other reasons why having residency in the country can be so important, even if you're not an Italian citizen. And even recently, there was an episode of the Italian Citizenship Podcast that was uploaded, or maybe it was the Italian Real Estate Podcast, that was about being a citizen, Italian dual citizen, versus just getting simply only residency in Italy. And with some of these topics, you may actually want to go check that out because you'll get a little bit more information there about maybe some of the differences and also some of the necessities of actually being a resident of the country. So this is why I said in so many episodes, it's important to make sure that you have your residency properly taken care of and you have a proper rental contract, because so much of that hinges on that particular detail. And you can't enter into this like closed loop without this one particular detail. And so even, for example, like when you're waiting for the police check to happen at your home, if, for example, you're not there, then they may try to come another time to try and catch you off guard. They're trying to catch you at a time that it's not necessarily going to be like you're expecting them, because they don't want to have it be in that situation that I was talking before, where a person might be trying to improperly gain residency in a particular location. So you may only have a couple of opportunities, maybe even one opportunity, before they'll stop coming and say, hey, that this is not possible. So you really do want to make sure that you are home to be able to expect them. Some places they might be able to say, hey, yeah, I'm working during this time, so maybe if you can come during this time or this time, I'm more likely to be home. And then so from there, even again, that comes with the bank account. And then so you need the bank account potentially to pay these things. Or if you don't, then you need the Codice Fiscale at the very least to sign up for any type of contract. Or even if you want to sign up for a rewards program with a particular supermarket or store, or if you're wanting to get a loan, or if you're wanting to buy something on payments, like for example, in an electronics store, then you will also need your fiscal code as well as your fiscal documents, because in Italy, there is no credit score like there is in the US. So this is something that is proven in different ways, and it's proven normally through your financial situation, and you might actually have to bring a stack of documents, depending on what your particular set of circumstances are. But they are looking for things that are from Italy. They're looking for what money you're making in Italy, not that you're getting a pension from the US and then transferring that to an Italian bank account. They want to see what is actually tangible in the country. But anyway, I'm Rafael Di Furia. This is where I'm going to round things out for this episode. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. And thank you to those of you who support this project on a monthly basis through rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon or patreon.com/RafaelDiFuria, or the one-time support through rafaeldifuria.com/support, as well as the thank you, the super thanks button here on YouTube. And thank you to those of you who take part in the conversation by sharing your thoughts down in the comment section below, as well as leaving likes and sharing these episodes with your friends. And of course, again, I'm Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and I will see you all for the next episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Later.